for those of you who have coached before, you know, you all have your ways of doing things, and we all have the drills we like. And so one thing I will mention is I'll bring up some drills that I like. But as a group, you know, it'd be great to, you know, build a network. So again, I provided my phone number, right? I would love for people to reach out. I'm coaching at the intermediates level this year. You know, scrimmages are great, right? How many intermediate coaches are here? A couple. Oh, cool. All right. I didn't know that. All right, cool. So I'll throw this offer out there, right? I'll scrimmage anytime, right? Anytime. So just reach out to me. You know, let's get together. Even if you didn't want to scrimmage, you know, I'm open to talking about drills or ideas in both ways. You know, I've learned a lot from coaches, and honestly, also like from a level of humility, I've learned a lot from the girls. That's the other thing. You know, ask your girls, like create this feedback loop, right? You know, ask them what games do you like to play? What drills do you like the most? And I tell you, you know, some of the drills that are in my back pocket all the time are drills that girls have brought up. The things I share with you here are just an example, and you know, but all of us working together is I think probably, you know, the most beneficial. So again, reach out. But one of the things I like to do in my first practice is to go through a progression and have my assistant coach either run the drills and then I take notes, or I'll run the drills and they can take some notes. And then after that first practice, we'll get together and we'll kind of talk about the strengths and weaknesses of the players with the intention of, you know, really trying to help each player, you know, become the best that they can, right? You have players who are great hitters and are terrible at throwing. You know, their mechanics are awful. You know, instead of focusing on both aspects, you know, maybe we lean into the throwing, and vice versa. We've got a lot of players who might have solid, you know, fielding foundation, but they can't hit very well, right? Or they might not be confident. So if we can kind of get specific with our plan, then I think it helps every player. So what I typically do is you go through the warm up. What the warm up is, you know, typically is if you start, you know, close 10 feet or so. Let them throw a couple balls, back it up, and then see how far they can get, right? Typically, I'll line them up so that at the end, you know, they're at third and first, right? And so if they can throw from third and first, great. I mean, seniors probably can. Intermediates, maybe. Squirts, I'd be surprised. I know my daughter can't. But, you know, then that's where you can start to see that ceiling. You can see which girls have a really strong arm. You can watch that mechanics, right? So you can see, you know, do they have good mechanics? Is that the problem? Is it that they're just smaller? You know, different things like that. Then the next one is fly balls. So I'll kind of group girls in 2 or 3. You can use the paddle, hit some fly balls, you know, see how vocal they are. You know, this helps with understanding leadership. You know, who's vocal, right? Who speaks up and yells, got it, right? Maybe you can lean into that a little bit, you know, have that person be a bit of a leader on your team, help them build up the other players, have them be more vocal. That first step when it comes to fly balls is so important, right? Is to see that trajectory, right? Some of that just comes with repetition. The other thing is the drop step, you know, so throw them behind them, make sure that they get that drop step going rather than, you know, backpedaling, falling on the butt. So those are some of the things that you can kind of focus on and seeing where there might be some weaknesses. Ground ball, I'll put a plug in right now. Will Easton just did the mites and mini mites training. I highly recommend that when that video comes out that you take a look at it. It's some of that foundational work. So when you think about ground ball drills, you think about the triangle, right? So you got your feet out, you got your glove down, right? So throw some ground balls, you know, see if they've got a good foundation, that their back is straight, that their knees are bent, that their eyes are looking up. Again, these are things that notes that you can take as you work on skill progression for your players. And then when you do the ground ball training, have a person at first, right? Someone who you might think might be a good first base person. When you throw that ground ball to them, see the transfer speed. How fast does it come out of their glove? And making sure that as they do that their mechanics are good, right? You know, there's all kinds of ways to show, you know, throwing progression. Like I said, Will has some ideas when it comes to squirts, and I think, or I'm sorry, mini mites and mites. If you watch his video, you can kind of get some of that terminology that he uses. There are kind of a million different ways to teach all these foundational items. You know, Will and I have been talking a lot about the fact that I think some of that consistency is good. So, you know, think about the terminology that he uses, then apply that at your level. Then those kids might remember it from their time in mini mites and say, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense, right? The next thing is moving into batting practice and tee work. So everybody's going to have a tee, and we got one set up here. The nets, I believe, are optional. Okay, yep. So you can grab a net if you want to. You know, it's more stuff to carry. it's more stuff to set up. But if you have a tendency to get to the field early, you know, on game days, and you have parents that can help out, it's good to have that. The nice thing about the tee, and especially for that first practice, is you can really start to isolate form, right? And you can start to pay attention to the form and which areas, you know, you need to work on with the kids, right? So, I mean, if you think about, you know, taking a step, leading with your hips, and then your arms, right? With the tee, that really helps to kind of get all that in a controlled environment. Once you maybe do a little bit of tee work, you can move to a soft toss, right? So you can sit at about a 45-degree angle from the kid, toss the ball up, and again, watch their mechanics. There's variations of that as well. You can go behind them and toss it over them so that instead of them watching you, they're reacting to the ball. So those are some other things that I mentioned here in the first practice evaluation that you can do. The consistency, the form, the mechanics, you know, what kind of a hitter are they? Are they a power hitter, or are they a contact hitter? All of this can kind of feed into a lineup, right? So eventually that's ultimately what you're gonna have to figure out is what your lineup's gonna look like. So using some of this initial tee, soft toss, and coach toss practice can help you understand, you know, what your lineup might look like. And then another one is base running. So, you know, you can progress into base running, especially for these levels. Maybe Squirts is a little different, but definitely for intermediates and seniors. You know, how quick are they to get from home to first, right? You can throw in some competition in here. That's always good. So you can time them from home to first. You know, see who your faster players are. See which ones aren't quite as fast. Acceleration, and then the other thing is signals, right? So this is also an opportunity if your coaches, I don't know how many coaches, like I have one assistant coach, so I'm gonna have to recruit a parent to be a base coach. You know, help train your base coaches at the same time, right? So think about the signals you want to use to get girls to stay at the base or to go around. Pay attention to when they're rounding the base, are they just hitting the corner and making a wide arc and keeping up their momentum? And then when they pass first, pay attention to where their eyes go, right? So we need to train the girls to look at third base coach, right? As soon as they pass first, they're looking at third base. So these are some things, again, that you can look at evaluating and seeing where you might need to, you know, teach the kids some skills. And then, you know, at the end is situational scrimmage. This is, I think, a good one, again, for the first practice to understand, you know, the IQ, baseball, softball IQ of the players. So, you know, how fast do they decide? Who communicates and who's silent? You know, you think about the positions like shortstop, you know, left center, catcher. You need vocal players, right, to help you know, communicate to your team. This last year, I was lucky to have a girl who was very loud and communicative at shortstop, and she was able to help me direct, you know, the infield and the outfield with shifts and depth and all of that. So you kind of pay attention to that to see if you can get some ideas around the kids and where you want to put them. And then after all of this, with all the notes that you've taken or your assistant has taken, just kind of get together and then figure out, you know, what you want to do from there. I'll also kind of at this point put a plug in for some resources, and again, you've got a handout for this as well. There are, you know, you can use like AI, right? So ChatGPT, Claude, you know, these different things that are out there. Once you've developed your notes, and you could get them into a program and kind of start to develop a practice plan. If you've ever used these programs before, you'll kind of understand there's some value there. If you haven't, again, I'll throw this out there. Give me a call or shoot me a text or something like that, and I can kind of go over that with you. The beauty of some of this is if you get your notes, you know, into a program like that, like ChatGPT or whatever it is, you know, you can start kind of asking questions and building out a plan, and it can be really beneficial. And then the other thing is there's some resources out there, Meg Rem softball, and that should be in your notes too. and softballspot.com. Softballspot.com is like 1,000 free drills. So again, you know, if you want to start finding some drills, you can go out there. Meg Rem is really good at breaking down fundamentals. You can watch her hitting and fielding and throwing drills. She really breaks down every bit of the fundamentals. So that's another good one to look at. Kind of the next piece that I'll go over at this point is some example practice drills. You know, in your packets there, you guys are going to have this handout as well. I put together 7 of my favorite drills. I would love to, again, you know, for all you to reach out if you got drills that you like that are beneficial. You know, let me know. We can get them integrated into the packets in the future. Or again, I think as the season winds down, we're all going to get together as coaches with our level directors, and we can kind of talk and share ideas and things like that. So one good drill is called the 21 out drill. I think that's a pretty common drill. So this one it's all about kind of adding pressure and sort of game speed situations. As coach, you hit the ball, you either have runners or you kind of call out the play. So you might say, you know, runner on first, you hit the ball, right? And then they got to throw it to second, try to get a double play second, first. And then every time they're successful, that counts as an out, and they have to get up to 21 consecutive outs. And if there's an error, right? You're like, at Squirts, really? This could take all night. If there's an error, then they start back from the beginning. So it can get pretty intense, especially when you get up to those 15, 16, 17 outs. It gets pretty intense. If you find that you're just absolutely not able to get there, you know, there's variations, right? So you could do 21 total outs, right? So how many errors do you get within those 21 outs? You could do 11, right? So that's kind of part of it. It's all about kind of pivoting, figuring out what works for your team. If your team's having a bad day, which happens, right? You know, you switch it up. Then the other thing is, and with all of these drills is, I'm a big fan of I motivate my team with food. So I bring treats to the practice. And so, you know, that's the other thing is kind of make it fun, right? So give them something to look forward to. And then that way, you know, and I think this also, especially with the 21 outs drill, it really helps build that teamwork. Then the other thing is with the 21 outs, if you want to make it even harder, start to add runners, right? So that's one. Another one is caterpillar. So with this one, and this one's a fan favorite. The kids love this drill. So you get your team to line up one behind the other like this. All the kids are behind. And you either hit or you throw the ball. All the kids besides the one in the far back, the ball has to go between their legs. So what this teaches, and you try to get them into, you know, get their knees bent, right? And what this teaches is that, you know, to move, to shuffle, to field the ball, right? But they're not, the first whatever number aren't going to field the ball. And then at the end, it's kind of difficult because, especially if you hit that ball or you throw it fast, they have to just react, right? They might not know exactly where that ball is. If the person in the back fields it cleanly, then they move to the front and you go through. If they don't field it cleanly, they're out. And the game ends when there's the last person. Another one, and I think this actually came from Mia, is called the alternating double play. This one is phenomenal because it helps teach, especially at intermediates and senior level, it helps teach that partnership between shortstop and second. You know, if you're playing shortstop, you're covering second base if second base is making the play, and vice versa. So you line up your kids at short and second, and you hit the ball. It's simple as that. So if it goes to the shortstop, second base is going to cover second, shortstop throws to second, and then they throw to first, right? So it gets that double play action, gets your first base person some training, and then it gets your other players to understand that situational awareness, that IQ, right? Because at these levels, IQ starts to really come into play, right? And so you just do that over and over and over again, right? And the kids love this drill. The other thing that it teaches is the different throws based on how close you are to a player. So if you're fielding that ball, you know, near second base as shortstop, second base is right there, you know, you're not going to get up and whip it at them, right? Though kids will do that all the time. You know, you just toss it to them, right? Same thing as if you're far away, you know, you're not just going to toss it to them. So, you know, kids have to make those decisions. They need to decide where they are, right? What they're going to do as far as a fielder, and then how they're going to throw that ball. And then either second or short, whoever's covering second base, turning around, setting up, and getting the ball to first cleanly. Biggest errors I've seen in those cases is that speed and that decision-making process, right? Bad throws to first is a very common one because girls, the players in general have a tendency to rush it to try to get that play there, right? And so you kind of teach them to slow it down a little bit, take that extra second to get to where they need to be. And then that leads to another drill, which is called 3-2-1 run. So you split your team in half. One half is at home, the other half is at third. For the third, one of those players, you pick a player to go to second base, and then you line up 3 balls. And when you say go, the team at home has to make it to second before the team at third can throw all 3 balls cleanly to second base. In theory, it seems skewed towards the runner, but what I find over and over and over again is that, again, these kids are rushing the throw, right? And we see that all the time in games, right? Games have high pressure. Instead of setting up and using the mechanics that we're learning over and over in practice, they're just trying to get that ball to where it needs to be. So often when we do this one is that, at least one of the 3 balls doesn't make it to the second base person. And then when that happens, that second base person has to go get that ball, field it, bring it back to second before the thrower can throw another ball. So oftentimes it's the running team that wins. And then once everyone's gone through, you switch, and then the other team gets a chance to run, and then the alternate team gets a chance to throw. They keep score. So if the thrower gets the 3 balls there before the runner, that team gets a point. If the runner gets there before the 3 balls, then their team gets a point. And then the team with the most points at the end gets candy. So another one is pop-up racket drill. So I thought I'd throw this in here because we have the pop-up racket. For my team at least, probably one of the biggest struggles is those outfield balls, right? So this one isn't as exciting, but honestly, just breaking up your team, having a couple coaches, hitting pop-ups over and over and over again, right? So again, this one, and that drop step is so key too. So don't forget that one. Often, especially with the intermediates, you want your players to play shallow, right? Because statistically, a lot of the hits are ground balls or line drives. So if you can teach that drop step so that when there is that kid who can hit it over their heads, they have a chance to get it, that's key as well. And then the 3-group scrimmage. So I find that it can be a little bit difficult to run a full-on scrimmage with 12 players and being able to fill all the positions. So I break my team up into 3 groups of 4, so when you got a full team. So 2 of the groups are out in the field, so that'll typically give you, and then if a coach is pitching, that gives you enough players to fill a full field. And then you've got 4 players who are hitting. So 3 outs, then those 4 go in the field, another group of 4 comes in to hit, same thing, and then those groups keep track of their score. All right, and then last one is called popcorn. Set up a rectangle out in the grass, and it's good to do this in the grass. And you and your assistant coach take turns throwing a ball. So typically you each have 6 balls. So you either throw a grounder, maybe a line drive, a pop-up, and you go back and forth. And the kids are in the rectangle, and that's their space. They need to defend it. And so, every throw, they need to try to get that throw, and then they need to pivot to the other coach. So this is a very reaction-based drill. They don't know where the ball is going to come from. They don't know what kind of ball they're going to get. And then if they field it cleanly, they get a point. If they don't, then and then the kid with the most points wins at the end. So the next piece is game management and playing time. So just a couple of things. This is probably one of the harder parts of coaching, just because everything you do in practice kind of gets applied here, right? And I tell you, I think it was my second game coaching. I didn't know if I ever wanted to coach again because I got there, I had put together a perfect lineup, and then 2 kids didn't show up, so I was scrambling to figure out the lineup. And then I had 2 players out in left center field. The other coach was yelling at me about it. The ump's like, "Hey, come on, get your players moving," and I'm like, "I can't do this anymore. I can't. This is hard. This is hard." So that's real, right? I mean, I think we've all probably felt that. But I think as we remember, it's just a game, right? It's just a game at the end. But preparation does help, right? So just a couple of things. Obviously, plan those rotations ahead of time. Bug your parents to get the RSVPs in. That's been a big one for me. I just, I try my best, and then if there are people who kind of habitually don't get their RSVPs in, I try to talk to them, and I'm like, hey, please, please, please get this in, because I need this in order to build my lineup. I try to bug people and get, all my RSVPs by the night before. Build out your lineup, especially with double headers. I often create 3 lineups, just in case. And the other thing is, as I guess as a pro tip, use a pencil. So, and really one of the things for that is, there might be in intermediates and in seniors, you don't have to rotate the players' positions. In Squirts, do you have to? Yes. Okay, that's what I thought. So in intermediates and seniors, it gets a little tricky if we're being honest. And any of you who have coached at those levels, you'll understand. We all want to win, right? And but sometimes that creates situations where you've got players playing in the same positions because that's where they're really good, right? And you have to balance that. And obviously that's your own personal decision on how you do that. One of the things I do try to do is I try to make sure that I understand where a player wants to play, and then work with them on a kind of a game plan, milestones, right? Like if someone comes to me and says, I want to play shortstop, but they can't catch a ball for the life of them. Like I'm going to say, all right, here, look, let's work through this progression, and ultimately there's a goal here that I can help you achieve. The other thing is, if you're winning by a lot, that's an awesome opportunity to just scratch your entire lineup and put people in spots that they usually aren't in. I try to do that as much as I possibly can if we're winning, if we're up, But then ultimately too, again, it's a game, right? So it's up to all of us, but let people play, right? Let them play where they want to play. And in practice, I try to reserve at least 45 minutes for a scrimmage, and that's also a good time to put those players in positions that they aren't used to, right? So if someone really wants to play shortstop, you don't feel they're ready for it, throw them in there in a scrimmage, right? Let them get a chance at it. One thing I will mention kind of in closing, I guess, is communicate clearly with your players, be proactive, right? And also just remember that this is for the kids. And, I think with mini mites and mites, it's easy to say that. Sometimes at these levels, it does get intense. You're playing, the beauty of South Metro is that there's this built-in league, and that you can play for your city, and you can be proud. You're playing for Bloomington, and you're winning games and things like that. But then the inverse is also the case, and there's some pretty intense cities out there, and it's, some people know. I think the coaches their hearts are in the right place, right? Most of them, right? And it's a great environment. So play for the kids, and then also just reach out if you need anything from me. And Mark, I put my name and Mark's name in your sheets there, and then any feedback too would be great. Like any drills, I could try to share those with everybody. So.